All right, welcome everybody to today's Futures Afternoon Update. Today's date is Tuesday, May the 21st, 2019. Another beautiful day here in Toronto, Ontario. And let's get started here with today's update. There we go, just gotta mute myself over on the other screen. Perfect. So what we're gonna start with today, Georgie covered some of the overnight drivers here in the morning update. So as far as you guys are concerned, this China-U.S. trade war, there's a bit of news came in over the weekend with regards to this. We had Chinese Foreign Minister spokesman Lu Kang mention that the trade deal Trump's referring to was never in place. China never broke any deal. China is said to have extended ban on imports of medium to heavy rare earths, including dysprosium oxide and terbium oxide from Myanmar, raised rare earth import tariffs from the US to 25% from 10%. And there's also mention here that Huawei is being granted a 90-day license by US. It's called the same trick Trump did with ZTE Core, and this is coming from Money China publication out in China. So again, you're seeing something similar. Both sides are kind of talking it down. Trump mentioning that the reason for the tariff increase was as a result of China, backpedaling from the original agreements. And here's Chinese foreign minister mentioning that, the deal Trump was referring to was never in place and that China didn't break any deal. So more of the same as far as that China-U.S. trade war is concerned. Again, any squawks with regards to this, you'll want to keep a wide ear open. Just got a squawk coming in here.
Will have a modest effect on the U.S. economy. And if the U.S. tariffs are widespread and prolonged, the effect on the markets and growth could be larger. Sees a potential for more disruptive trade negotiations is an important reason for policy makers to be patient.
Okay, yeah, so that was a little swap just came in.
Inflation, the Fed's Rosenberg saying that inflation could return to the Fed's target more rapidly if tariffs are imposed in a voter and a moderate commentary from Boston.
All right, so I'll just speak over him now that he's talking about Fed's Rosengren, who's speaking at the moment. We've got, as far as any economic and related news, we had a couple of figures coming out of the States today. Most notably, your April existing home sales came in at 5.19 million versus 5.35 million. We also had Fed's Bostic spoke earlier, who's a non-voting dove, agree with Powell on financial risks. U.S. inflation is not so far from Fed target that expectations are becoming unanchored. Give me 1 second, guys. I'm just going to turn the squawk off because he's getting in my way. All right, back to action. So that's what we had as far as economic releases. We also had April Philadelphia Fed non-manufacturing index came in at 17.3 versus 21 prior. What else have we got? Iraq PM Abdul Mahdi sending envoys to Washington and Tehran to halt tensions between the two nations. So Iraq's looking to, play a mediating role between Iran and the States at the moment. And Georgia also mentioned this in the morning report that China reportedly has no information on the Trump-Xi meeting at the G20 in Japan, despite Trump's earlier announcement. So we're seeing a little bit of, back and forth here. Seems to be the case that Trump's mentioning, China backstepped on their original agreements. China saying that there was no such agreement in place that they could have done that from. Then you had Trump mentioning that, we're going to be meeting Xi at the G20 summit. And now you have China coming out saying that there's no such information that they're aware of, that Trump is going to be meeting with Xi. So murky waters really, as this trade war continues, and this is kind of what you can come to expect going forward. So that's what we've got here as far as squawks, as far as news is concerned. As far as remainder of the session, as mentioned, we have FOMC member Rosengren speaking at the moment. I just heard some squawks on the back of that, speaking on inflation. And that is really all that we have for the remainder of today's session, at least that is scheduled. FOMC member Rosengren is really the only thing left here until tomorrow. We've got FOMC member Bullard speaking at 1 a.m. Eastern time. So not too much as far as economic news is related. Just remember that China-US trade war is of big headline risk into this week as well. So keep an ear out, keep that squawk going. We'll turn that back on shortly after I turn this guy off. But that's essentially what you need to have in there, because on days like today, on weeks like the last 2-3 weeks, especially in times like this where we have a US president whose 140 character tweets can affect the stock market, and he well knows that. And you see quite timely tweets on the back of, you know, the weakness in the market or strength in the market. So no surprise there, but it's always good to have that new squawk just in case any wire bombs do come through. Can keep you on the right side of things. So with that being said, let me close up these tabs here. Let's pop into our Sierra chart setup here. Take a quick look at our quote board. Just find my mouse. There we are. Take a quick look at our quote board, and we'll take a quick peek at some nice key levels here on SPOs and on crude oil futures. So let me just switch on over to those charts here for you guys. And what you are seeing now is the Sierra chart platform. You got our quote board right here. So first things first, you have got crude oil futures at the bottom here, around 494,000 contracts traded thus far on the session, and daily change percentage, we are down 0.51%. Yesterday's close comes in at 63.33. Our last traded figure here is 62.89. So we are a bit down from the previous day close. We are below the pit session open. So looking pretty bearish here on crude to start the session. Volume is pretty much on average. You know, we've been seeing a little bit of increase of volume on the back of that US-Iran tensions. However, looking like that's kind of subsiding here. Not that much volume in here. So mediocre volume on crude. SPOs, we are seeing quite volume relative to our 2-week trend. We've been seeing around 1 million contracts traded around this time of day for the last 2 weeks. A little bit less than that, around 846. Daily change percentage, we are up 0.73%. Previous day close came in at 28.48. However, if you're just looking at this chart, you can see it's just been super choppy. One real directional move this morning, which the team was able to capture. However, it's been kind of dying down here. Just seen a pullback on the S&P 500s, and we'll get into some of your key levels going forward. But volume relatively, you know, on average for both of these markets, just below average. And that's kind of the trend today. That's why you're seeing such chop. We are seeing some value being built up here around that open of today's session. And so this is what the volume is looking like. So now that we got an idea of the quote board, what the volume is looking like, where these markets are relative to their previous day close, let's switch over to our pivot chart here and have a quick peek at what crude and S&P 500 are up to on today's session. So crude oil on your left hand here, this is a 1-hour bar chart. What you are seeing on today's session, Globex pivot open here. We saw it hold a support once, twice, 3 times. And then into the the Chicago pit open here, a little breakdown below that pivot, came up to retest it. That is your 63.30s, retested it here, and you saw the sellers fail that there. So the sellers came in, defended that pivot, rotated the market lower, had a quick little rotation higher, and now the sellers are stepping in to press this guy lower again. What are your potential targets? Well, S1 will be your first big target here, 62.60s. That is your first target, and that also lines up with your previous day low. So S1 and previous day low line up on today's session, so that will be a good first level of support. Below that, we can potentially press down into that S2, which also lines up with that round number of 62. So watch for that as long as crude stays below the pivot. If we do see the buyers start picking this thing back up, you can see yesterday's session, that low kind of came in right around where the S1 sits today, and that was your previous day low. So again, expecting to see a bit of a bounce on here. The question is, do the buyers step in here, press this thing back to the pivot, or do we just get a small relief rally going here and the sellers clobber this thing back under? That really is a question. And as of today's session, what we're saying is below that pivot, that is looking more likely. If the buyers get this market back above that pivot, we could make a press back towards those 64s. However, as it stands below the pivot, we're looking to remain short. And we do seem to be below the the opening range, which was between the 63.50s and around the 63.20s. So below the opening range, below the open, below the previous day close, and below the pivot. So market sentiment looking bearish at this point of the session, and we're looking to potentially pick up some shorts into that move down into those 62.60s. We'll step onto our 10-tick chart in a second, give you that key level, which the market's kind of trading into at the moment. But let's cover the SPOOs first. So SPOOs, again, 60-minute bar chart here. What you saw is a press up into that pivot coming into the Globex session, kind of broke above that, held the pivot as support overnight, and we kind of had this consolidation, recent press up into the R1. We saw the seller step in at the R1, defend that around the 69.5s. Now we're kind of meandering between the R1 and that pit session around the 28.50s. So SPOOs are a little bit more neutral today, whereas crude oil is more bearish at this point of the session. We are above the previous day close and above the the US open here on the S&P 500. And we are currently above that overnight high. So you can also argue that SPOOs are bullish. However, if you come back into this, if you take a look back into a little bit of a further back, you'll see that, market structure was starting to form a little bit of bearish, rather the market was starting to form bearish market structure. We're getting lower lows, lower highs. This could be a potential lower high if the bears come in and defend this level here at the 69.5s. If we get another rotation back in there that fails, we could see another press back towards the pivot right around the 28.50s. And below that, your previous day close overnight low around the 48s and 46 quarters. So 69.5, really your line in the sand for the bears. If these guys want to press this thing lower, this is where it's likely going to happen on a failure of a rotation back up into that zone, and we could see a potential press lower. So that's what we've got on SPOOs and crude oil. Sean, CY, we basically cover crude oil and S&P 500 in this update. However, if you guys do provide us feedback, we can always look into adding more assets. We just got to be time sensitive here, trying to get these guys covered within 15-20 minutes. So that's all that we got here. As far as your charts, here is crude oil. You are seeing, I think we were mentioning this yesterday, that there was a nice big sell-off from that level right around the 63.90s. Yeah, 63.90s, big sell-off coming back into that zone. We saw some resistance up into the 63.60s. There's one rotation, two rotation, nice third rotation up into that zone, ultimately failed. And US Open was right around these 63.55s. Previous day high was your 63.56s. Sold off right on the open, right into our 5-day volume profile point of control. Kind of broke that low, retested the VWAP here, retested that previous day close at the 63.30s, and we pressed lower from there, just having made a new lower low. Now this bright line here, that is the value area low on the 5-day volume profile right up here. So we've made a run to a new low, which is essentially an unfair low. If you watch the auction market theory, unfair low here, where are we rotating back up to? Your point of control, this is where value is. Now the question becomes, do we start seeing sellers step in on this thing right around these 63.10s? And do we press this thing back lower, or does this thing rip back up to the VWAPs? And do we press lower from there? So looking for the bearish side at the moment. You did see a brand new low here. Now we're kind of waiting for this rotation to fizzle out. We want to see the buyers fizzle out and Really, that first location is right around here, the 63s to the 63.10s. If it does get back up above that level, your next real line in the sand is this Globex VWAP, since we've seen it hold as resistance once. If we do see another pullback, this is a more aggressive level, 63.10s. More conservative would be a move back up into those 63.30s. Couple of wicks on failed rotations. So what you saw here, 1 rotation, 2 rotation, 3 rotation, and then sellers buried the hatchet there. So we'll watch for something similar here. Don't want to short straight into this. You'll want to see similar price action here. As it's coming up, you want to see wicks starting to show up on rotations. You know, if we see those wicks starting to show up, that could be a sign sellers are ready to press this thing back lower. So that's ultimately what we're watching for on this market. As long as we stay below that Globex VWAP previous day close, we'll be interested in the short side. Up above it, don't really look to long it, since there is some overhead supply really into those 63.60s. So really at this point of the session, trading with the trend, we'll be looking to sell rallies and not really looking to buy, to be quite honest, at this point in time. So that's what we've got for crude oil. S&P 500, what you are seeing is a nice little double bottom here around these 28.30s. Nice rotation lower. We did break above this market structure here in the 54s, 55 quarters. And what you see on the back of that is a breakout. Couldn't quite get above it first time. You had late buyers coming in here, rotate lower, get their sell stops, and then now the market's ready to go. So this all happened overnight. And what we saw was a break over that previous day high, rotation back down, and the market started to form some structure around this level. And so in the trading room, we had the opening range sitting between the 62s and I believe right around the 57 halves, right around that open. And what we were seeing was, you know, this thing's looking bullish, market structure suggesting bullish. We had that rotation overnight, and that kind of held above the previous day high. Second rotation back down to that level. So nice range was forming, and we were just playing this range in the trading room. You know, fading the top side was a little bit dangerous, a little bit aggressive, but we had a bunch of people in the room buying these rotations off of the VWAP. And then eventually you had the move that pressed back above that overnight high. If you think about this, each time the market rotates back up into this level, and you know, you're seeing a failure of the sellers to really press this thing back below this market structure. Each failure to do so, right? Each failure to break below that low, any sellers starting to step in here, they got their stops right above that opening or overnight high. So each rotation lower that did not break market structure, right? So you had one rotation, sellers got stuck short here, stops are above. Another rotation up, more selling comes in. They couldn't quite get it to break back down, stops back up here. Next rotation higher, they get it, sellers step on it again, can't get this thing to break VWAP. Each one of these rotations up, you can imagine more sellers starting to come into that market, and each failed rotation, there's just a cluster of buy stops forming right around that level. What happens after, you know, enough failed rotations? Buyers are accumulating these lows, and you got stops right up above. What happens to those stops? You get your flush, right? So that was the flush. We were looking for this in the trading room. You know, we're playing this range here in the morning, and some of the people in the room caught, you know, that breakout up there. We were able to qualify a nice rotation lower. I believe it was this rotation back down into those 63s, somewhere around here for that nice quick press up to those 70s. And now the market's kind of rotated back into that level. So you have previous resistance, should turn support on the retest. And that's kind of what we're seeing here. Nice little wick. Where did this wick take place? Well, you got big volume right in those VWAPs, your PIT VWAP and your Globex VWAP. Nice little rotation in there. Now you're seeing buyers starting to step this thing up, and we are holding these rotations as it's climbing higher. So what you'll want to see now is ultimately any rotations into those 63 halves, 62s, you'll want to see that finding support in order to press this thing back up higher. Your real danger here becomes a move back up into these current session highs around those 70s. If we do get back up into this zone and we fail, we could see a quick press back down into this level and then back into our previous day high, potentially back into the previous day close, overnight low. But really, until that happens, not really interested in the short side. Still looking long side is the right side at this point in the session. What you will notice if I kind of zoom out is that this level here that I've got drawn on, right around that level, you can see it's held as support, held as resistance, resistance, support, resistance, resistance, and now we are looking to trade back up into there. So this could be a nice big level. You're seeing some offers sitting there at the moment right around that 2870s. So watch for that level. If we do come back up in there and fail, maybe we get a breakout, maybe 1 or 2 ticks above that previous high, and then a quick reversal on volume. That could be a sign that we're looking to press back down. But up and until that happens, still looking like the long side is the right side. Again, any rotations holding into those 62s, you could look for that press up higher. So that's what we've got for you for both of these markets, your crude oil futures and your S&P 500s. And with that being said, let us wrap this puppy up here with a quick peek at our TradePro Performance Index, which is this one right here. So what this essentially shows you for the newer viewers, anyone that has been, watching these since we started them about a month or two ago, you've got a nice performance index where we track the performance of our community members. Here we've got a Discord room where, we share ideas every morning and we walk you guys through some key levels, what we're seeing as far as order flow, inventory levels, anything like that. We're basically order flow traders. So we look to stay on the right side of inventory and look to play the moves higher and lower based on what those big offers and big sellers are doing. So that's what our style is, and our TradePro Performance Index shows you that it is working because our community is absolutely killing it so far in May. We had a strong close to the week last week. A little bit of a give back on today's session from 70 down to 64%, but overall still a great session. It was a bit choppier to start the morning, as we mentioned, and as you just saw on those charts, SPOOs were really holding within their opening range up until we were basically signing off. Quick move to the upside, and that was really difficult to get on if you were not long from the range lows. So happy to see that majority of the room is still green. 51% was up on the session, 12% were flat, and 35% were down. So great result on today's session. Again, average on May so far 66.28%, which is absolutely great. And come to think of it, these are the types of results that, just because we have them, and not to sound biased or anything, but you want to see a room that has good days and that has bad days. If you've got any, trading academies suggesting that their whole room is green, 100% green every single day of the week, there's something a little bit fishy about that. What you want to see is, transparency, and you want to see realistic numbers. This industry, realistically, you're going to have losing days. And even on trending days, you're going to have some people not doing as well as others. And this is a really good, portrayal of that. We have our soft days. I mean, we don't have many soft days, but those do come. And this is really just a sign, not necessarily of what we provide, but this is a sign of what our community is like. This is the environment of the community. And, if you've been on the losing side for far too long and, you want to transition to the green side, this is a great place to start. And these are the results that our members are getting. We cannot vote. So our head traders here, George, myself, Victorio, Stephen, we cannot vote in these polls. These results are strictly based on what the members are achieving. So with that being said, a little bit of a rant, but I feel like that's something important to say. And that is really going to be it for today's session. So I'll switch the camera over to myself and give you guys a nice sign off as we come into that last part of the session. There we go. As we come into that last part of the session, just want you guys to follow the 3 rules. We are seeing summer markets starting to come in with that, lackluster volume on today's session. want you guys to follow the 3 rules: remain patient, remain diligent, and remain disciplined. So until tomorrow, I hope you guys, or rather I wish you guys good luck and good trading. We'll see you for tomorrow's update, 9 a.m. on YouTube. If you guys aren't subscribed, make sure to do so. You're gonna get notified anytime that we go live. So make sure to subscribe and click that notification bell to do that and get notified when we do go live. We got morning at 9 a.m. before the market opens. You guys will get a nice dose of the overnight drivers. Anything that can affect the market for the current session, you guys will get that from Georgie over here on my right side here. And anything coming into the afternoon sessions, we take care of on this midday update. So hope you guys are enjoying these. This is still a pilot. We're trying to determine whether, you guys are enjoying this, whether this is worth the effort. So please let us know if this is worth the effort by liking, by commenting, by sharing our channel with your friends. Referring, or rather referrals are really the best form of a compliment here in our industry. And that's kind of what we're looking for you guys to do for us if you're enjoying these. So ranting a little bit today, but it's a beautiful day, and what can I say? My mind's kind of in the air, but that's going to be the sign off for today's session. Take care, guys. Until tomorrow, this is Mark from Trade Pro signing off. Have a great session.